Joining us now, America's Sheriff. Sheriff David Clarke is also Senior Policy Advisor to webuildthewall.us. Hey, Sheriff, great to have you.
John, it's always a pleasure.
I know you're fired up today. Cubs win, beat Seattle 6-1, only 3 games out. A lot of baseball remaining, and they've got a 3-game lead, I think, 2.5 or 3-game lead, 2.5, I think, in the wild card over Philadelphia. So a couple weeks ago, you were all down in the dumps and depressed. Then you were excited. Then you were depressed again. Now you're excited again. Boy, the Cubs put you on quite the coaster.
Yeah, it's a 48-hour cycle, though, because 48 hours ago, the Brewers, not the Brewers, the Cubs went, I think, 20 innings without scoring a run, for heaven's sakes. Shut out twice by the Brewers, for heaven's sakes. So I'm a little disappointed in the Astros could help out a little bit if they could have beat the Brewers last night. But as you indicated, I think about 25 games left. 7 for the Cubs, 7 with St. Louis, but they'd have to win like 6 or 7 of those to overcome that 3-game lead. That's not looking so good right now. But, yeah, wild card solidly in 2.5 over Philly. But, they still play some of these teams down the stretch. It's going to be tight. It really is.
It's going to be tight in the game last night. Any baseball fan, if you're a Washington Nationals fan, you got to be ecstatic last night, going to the bottom of the ninth at home, playing the Mets, both teams fighting to get in for a wild card. I never saw this before. In a game like this, the Nationals come up with a 7 spot to win it in the bottom of the ninth inning, walk-off fashion at home, going to the bottom of the ninth, down by 6 against the Mets, one of the best bullpens in the history of the major leagues. That completely implodes, and the Nationals get a 7 spot, walk it off in the bottom of the ninth, really putting a dagger in the hearts of the Mets. I mean, if you're a Mets fan, honestly, you're never going to get over that game. You're just not going to get over it. It's just too it's too tough, because now the Mets are in the wild card. Let me just check here fast. That puts the Mets 5 back.
5.
Yeah. It's a game you're not going to get over. Mets are done. I don't think you can come back. 5 games, 25 to go. You got to jump over 3 teams, and you blow a game like that. I think you're toast. So we'll see what happens. Right?
Yeah, you can stick a fork in the Mets, I think.
I think so.
5.5 is a lot. And like you said, they have to jump several teams. So,
right.
That bad start that they got off to is coming back to haunt them. Phillies, I don't know, hanging on by a thread, I think. There's still room for them to make the wild card, but they got to jump at least 1 team, maybe 2 or 2.5 out.
No pitching
position right now either.
No pitching. All right, let's get to the president now taking money, as he said, stalling 127 defense projects, taking money for the wall. All of a sudden, remember we were going through this whole thing about he's not building the wall, he's not building the wall, there is no wall, he's not building the wall. Now, all of a sudden, it's starting to get built at a pretty fast clip. You know what I was thinking about today? And I know it's coincidence, but it almost seemed like your organization, webuildthewall.us, remember when we went out there to El Paso and we had the big media blitz day and the radio row and everything? It almost seemed like since then, all of a sudden, the federal wall is starting to go up. Is it just just a coincidence?
It's amazing, isn't it? Well, let's connect the dots here a little bit. You
Okay.
got the Defense Department and media making a big deal out of this. Someone will probably go to court. Somebody that doesn't even have standing will go to court and try to block the president's move. It's totally lawful. Obama used to divert a lot of funds out of different agencies for his little pet projects. But you have the Defense Department. We give them money. Don't forget, it's our money. They're given a budget to defend the United States. The border issue, the border has to be defended. And so this crisis down at the border does involve defense. Therefore, if the president is spending money out of the defense budget, which is his authority to do, to defend the southern border of the United States, then it makes sense.
Well, but I think there's a coincidence because it almost seemed like okay, um, we went out there with a wall that you guys built with private funds, and then everybody was saying, well, okay, where's the federal wall? Where's Trump's wall? And it was almost like it inspired everybody to get it going because now we're actually getting some action with that. And I saw the numbers come in over the last month, and apprehensions were down dramatically in September. They were down in August. Also, seems like we made a deal with El Salvador, and so things finally starting to move in the president's direction.
And Guatemala, he made a deal with as well to get them to do their job. The president understood and knew that success that he could have was incumbent upon what the governments of Mexico, Honduras, and Guatemala, El Salvador would do as well. So it is coming together. I kind of knew it would at some point because everything that the president touches happens to turn to gold because he knows what he's doing and he's determined. Everybody else that has sat in that office, his predecessors, and all the people in Washington, D.C., they're afraid to do things. They're afraid of the political fallout, so on and so forth. He's not. He's a man. He's a bottom line. Only the bottom line matters. Only results matter. And it takes time, unfortunately, because it's like pulling teeth when you're dealing with the federal government. Anything you do in Washington, D.C., with the bureaucracy being as steep as it is, it just takes time. So now that this border thing is starting to come together, one of our goals is you know, John, with We Build a Wall, one of our goals was to shame the federal government into action. What we're doing is still going to go forward. It's still needed because we're building on private property, which the federal government cannot do. There's still gaps in the wall, even with what the feds are doing, as you saw down in New Mexico there at the El Paso sector. There's still gaps in the wall, in that federal wall, and we're still going to work to fill those things in.
Well, as Steve Bannon said, you guys are like the wall Green Berets. You go where nobody else can or will, and that's really what sets WeBuildAWall.us apart from everybody else. We're with America's Sheriff David Clarke with us, also Senior Advisor, WeBuildAWall.us. You want to make a donation to WeBuildAWall.us, please do, because the money is actually going to actually build a wall and not in a black hole. I want to get your take here on Walmart making the decision to not sell certain ammunition, discouraging people from going in that are open carry, even if they're licensed or in a state that allows it. And I'm going to play a clip here. Let's get to Kiara. Let's get to cut 2. Former Walmart CEO Bill Simon saying that unfortunately there's plenty of other places to buy ammunition. He said this yesterday on CNBC, closing bell. Let's hear from him and then get the sheriff to comment on Walmart's decision to get into the gun debate. Cut 2. You can't make this stuff up. Cut 2. I'm sorry.
No, unfortunately, first of all, I think Walmart has to do what they think is the right thing to do. They've had horrible tragedies in their stores, and they needed to take some sort of action. Unfortunately, it's kind of unreasonable to ask Bentonville to solve a problem that Washington can't seem to solve. And while I would hope that this would make things safer, unfortunately, there's plenty of places to buy ammunition.
So, one of the things that Walmart does is they say, we really don't want you to come in our store with a gun. Yet, if you had gone into the El Paso store with a gun, you could have shot the assailant before he shot you. I mean, what here am I missing, sir?
You're not missing anything. Look, Walmart could do what they want to do. It's private business. I don't really have a problem with that. If they want to make that decision, it could hurt their bottom line. I would say, fortunately, not unfortunately, fortunately, there will be other places to buy ammunition. But I'll tell you what, this weekend in the city of Chicago, 7 dead 34 shot. That, John, that goes, as you know, that goes on every single weekend during the summer in Chicago. 7 dead, 34 shot. That's about the same number that happened in that horrific incident in Odessa, Texas. Same type numbers, but you don't hear the CEO of Walmart. You don't hear any of these anti-gun people railing about the violence in the city of Chicago that goes on all the time, for heaven's sake. So, just a knee-jerk reaction by Walmart. But again, private business, they can make that decision. And then the consumer, the shoppers, they get to make the decision as well. I shy away from going into stores that have that, gun-free zone. They're, the only person that's protected in the gun-free zone is the killer. And that's why they choose those locations. But you never hear them make that connection, that sort of nexus to, hey, how come these places are being shot up, by these mass shooters? And then he mentioned, too, he said, Washington doesn't seem to be able to solve it. Washington isn't going to solve this mass shooter situation. There's a number of interventions, a number that have to go on to reduce, and that's all you're going to be able to do is potentially reduce the likelihood of these things happening. You're never going to totally eliminate them because you're dealing with human nature, for heaven's sakes. You're dealing with the flaws in the human condition, or some idiot would take a firearm, which is a tool not intended to mass kill innocent people, and walk into a public place and spray it up like he's in a video arcade. That's the flaw in the human condition. So, unfortunately, these things are going to continue to happen. I know people don't want to hear that. Oh, we have to do something. We have to do something. No, we might want to do something meaningful, but we shouldn't just do anything, because oftentimes the law of unintended consequences will pop up, as you know, and then you'll make the situation worse. Sometimes after everything settles down, you look at it, you go through it. Sometimes the best thing to do is nothing at all, because you can't do anything about it. And sometimes by doing just something, you'll make it worse.
Well, I agree with that. I'm also concerned, as we talked about last week, looking at the polling numbers and the number of Americans that want to see the government do something. And I get the do something could be worse. But when you get to these universal background checks, you look at the guy that shot up the cop and others in Odessa. He tried to get a gun, went through the background check, got rejected, so he couldn't get one. But then he got one by taking advantage of the loophole. What is your response to that, Sheriff?
First of all, that's an anomaly. And secondly, and this is the most important thing that I want to say here, no matter what they do, you're going to create a black market. People are going to be able to get guns come hell or high water. So even if you had, for instance, background checks on private sales, it's going to be a black market where if you want a gun, you're going to be able to buy one. It's just like drugs. Look what's happening in California and Colorado, where they've legalized marijuana. They thought that they would end up taking the drug dealers, the unlawful drug dealers out of business. It created a black market. The sales for illegal drugs have gone up. The drug cartels have moved in. The revenues aren't there. California thought was coming in. I think they had to cut their budget $350 million because the so-called proceeds off marijuana sales did not happen. There comes a point in life where you have to realize that we're not miracle workers. We're not going to stop all the bad in the world. Evil does exist. That's another thing that the left doesn't agree with, that evil actually exists. It's actually a thing. And so, I don't want to see another one of these things happen, but I also know that these technical fixes, and that's what they are. What we need is adaptive fixes, which are changes in behavior. But these technical fixes are not going to solve this. I thought ending bump stocks was supposed to solve this, or outlawing them. So we outlawed bump stocks. I thought if we banned the Confederate flag after that horrific Charleston church shooting, that would end mass shootings, and it didn't. So it's just on to the next thing, on to the next thing. I'll tell you right now that if the Congress passes background checks on private sales, if anybody thinks that there will not be a mass shooting after that, then they're pretty naive.
All right, let's get I got to get your comment on one more clip here. I got about a minute and a half. Kara, key up really fast. Here's Mitch McConnell yesterday on gun control legislation. Leader McConnell saying, if the president is in favor of it, I know we will pass it. I'll put it on the floor. Cut 5, McConnell.
The administration is in the process of studying what they're prepared to support, if anything, and I expect to get an answer to that next week. If the president is in favor of a number of things that he has discussed openly and publicly, and I know that if we pass it, it'll become law, I'll put it on the floor.
Reaction.
I think that thing is dead in the water. I really do, John. I don't like to get into too much guessing about what the president will do, but at the same time, the president knows that this isn't going to fix anything. So we'll see. McConnell, I don't know. He needs to work on approving the United States-Mexican-Canada trade agreement and leave some of this other stuff alone.
Yeah, we can't get that. We can't get that done either. The Democrats bottling that up in the House. I'm out of time. I want to thank Sheriff David Clarke for being with us. Big Cubs fan. Sheriff, always good to have you with us. John Fredericks Radio Network.